Okay, so what we're doing here today is going through the eye-set process, the same thing that we have done when you come through your course. If you'll look up here, what you'll see, just like you did it when you came here on day 2 of your whitetail course, I've got the diagram already set in place. The eye's already been leveled. I used my flashlight to make sure that the eye was leveled. It's pretty close. And I've got all my lines drawn in there. And what we have here is we have our horizontal line. You'll remember that when you did your diagram. That horizontal line is what we line our pupil with. It also gives you back center of the eye back here. We have broken it into 3 parts, the eye into 3 sections, 1, 2, 3. And we had a start point, a stop point, and that way we could break down the sections a little easier. And so what kind of information do we get from this? From this diagram that we use for training, we get the high point of the upper eyelid, which is we call the pitch. And then of course we get from the outside of the horizontal line that we align the pupil with, we get that back center of the eye, which you'll know as an egg from your course. And then we've got the low point. The low point is anywhere between center and rear third. And you just have to check your reference, and you'll see it a little different from one individual to the other. And so what we're trying to do is establish some parameters there. So this is the diagram that we're going to use to set our eye. Now, obviously, I do this a little bit differently when I'm doing my own day-to-day work, and I know some of you have come through and done intermediate or advanced courses, and you do things a little bit different. But this is basically a way for us to learn how to do it and then establish some consistency in it. So I'm going to start with as you'll recall from your course, my Tic Tacs. I've already got them pre-rolled out here. I'm going to have to break this bag to get in here to them. And we have, you'll recall we called this a Tootsie Roll, okay? And I'm going to roll this Tootsie Roll out into a slug. We have 2 Tootsie Rolls, 3 Tic Tacs. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to roll them out into slugs. This is always a joke. I'll tell you why. Because I've just rolled it out into the slug, and y'all know that don't look like no slug. But that's what we're going to call it. I'm going to roll them both out. That clay's a little bit soft. We're using water-based clay. Critter clay is ideally what we use when we do our eye work. And got me a couple of little Tic Tacs here. And I'm going to start with this first Tic Tac, and I'm going to place it into the front corner of the eye. Just right there where the caruncle's going to be. It just gives me a base of where that caruncle skin's going to lay. Okay, we know that the caruncle is that little triangle area in the front corner of the eye, and the caruncle itself is what's contained within that triangle. The triangle itself is the descension of the upper eyelid into the lacrimal crease, and the ascension of the lower eyelid, where the two come together in the lacrimal crease. And then, of course, that caruncle points to, spills out, creates the lacrimal crease, which descends down into the preorbital gland, or the lacrimal gland there here in the front. So if you have any questions about any of that, you can go back to your anatomy diagram that we gave you, and that should clear that up. If you have any questions, be sure and call me. So I got that first piece right there in the front where the caruncle goes, and now I'm going to start with my upper eyelid. And you can see here I drew a line, this angle line. Well, it kind of represents center mass of where our piece of clay is going to go on that upper eyelid. And you also remember too that we use these defined cornea eyes, and there's a little flat spot up there on the top. There is a left and a right eye that you get from that pair. Not all eyes on the market are like that, but this one really helps you to identify where the top of the eye is, and which direction the cornea needs to face. The fat end of the egg, that's the cornea, is the egg, and the fat end of the egg is always forward. The small end of the egg is always rearward. Remember that? You'll see that also in your diagrams that we gave you. If you'll take your piece of clay or your worm or whatever you want to call it, and you lay it right there on top of that cornea, Now on the outside of the iris there, where the sclera meets the iris on the cornea, there's a dark line that goes around there. It's called the limbal ring. So we don't want to just lay this piece of clay down on top of the cornea. We want to lay it down on top of the cornea and down just a little bit further to ensure that in that center 1/3 we have concealed the limbal ring. We're going to do the same thing when we put the bottom piece in. We want to make sure that the limbal ring has been concealed. So I'm going to take this piece and I'm going to lay it up here, and using my little line that I drew right there, that represents about center mass of my clay. And remember from your day 2 exercises, when we first lay that piece of clay in there like that, we want to be able to still see, as we're looking straight on, we want to still be able to see the pitch, that front 1/3 upper eyelid there. So, and I can see it. And we still want to be able to see the back center, which is the back corner of the eye and the back center. And I can. That ensures that I've laid this at the right angle. If I were to put it at too steep of an angle, then that's going to tell on me right there, because it's going to come down, it's going to cross the back corner, it's going to be below the back corner, and it's going to be above my pitch. And we're talking about that roll of clay before we flatten it out. If we can lay it in there and at the right angle, we should still be able to see the pitch point that we've drawn on the form and the back of the egg. Now, as you develop some skills with this and some practice with this, that's not going to be an issue, because you're going to get more familiar with that angle. But here in the beginning, I see it a lot. We get that angle a little bit too steep, and then this process doesn't come together, and we don't develop that consistency in our eye set. So I'm going to bring that back down. I'm setting it not only at the angle that I see from the line for my diagram, but I'm setting it down on the cornea, and I'm ensuring that it also comes down a couple millimeters, 2 or 3 millimeters below that limbal ring. And now I'm just going to kind of go in here and I'm going to flatten it out. And I want to be careful not to over tool my clay. And once I get it flattened out, I'm going to go to the front and I'm just going to kind of smear that out a little bit, just sort of blend it into the form. And I'll do the same thing at the top, just kind of carefully just rolling it over the top. And I'm going to take a little bit of water and put on my fingers here, just so I can tool it out. It's going to tool in really, really nicely. That's not a lot of clay. I mean, it's a Tootsie Roll size, and I took off probably 1/3 of it in that process. Now you look, it looks like a nice clean hood over the top of the eye. And just to make some checks, I've got a straight line, and I'm still above my back corner, where the clay meets the back of the form. I'm not too worried about this portion anymore, because I had to bring it up into the brow. And here's another thing, and I've pointed this out in the course. I see a lot of clay work being done where they push a lot of clay up onto the brow. If you think about it, the sculptor's already put clay up there on the brow. So what you're trying to connect is the top of the cornea with the brow. And that little section in there, that's basically your eyelid, and that's where that little bit of clay we're putting in there. It's very easy to put too much clay in there. So I'm going to go with my 3rd piece of clay, which is my 2nd Tootsie Roll, and I'm going to roll it out a little bit. I'll put me a little curve on the end. That's going to become the bottom portion of my carbuncle, the little triangle in the front corner. It's got the triangle in the front corner. It's going to have a definite bottom and top. So we're going to lay this in with that little curve in the front, and hopefully I'll have enough clay to get over that cheekbone there, that eye orbit. And I'm just going to lay this right there in the slot. You see the slot up underneath? I'm just going to kind of take that little point and bend it over to create the bottom of the carbuncle, and I'm going to lay it right up underneath in the slot, but in contact with the eyeball. Okay? And just at the bottom of that cornea, same thing as the top, where it conceals the limbal ring in the center 1/3. And then in the back, I'm going to come up straight up with it. All right? And I don't want to push it down, or I don't want to push it up. If I push it up, it's going to start to mushroom onto the eye. If I push it down, I'm going to pack away too much of the clay here. What I'm trying to do is just get this a little bit flat. Right here on this edge, I'm kind of touching the glass eye and the clay at the same time, but very lightly. And that leaves it a little bit full on the bottom, and then I can just kind of come around and just pull this down, just kind of carefully roll it down, a little bit of water on my finger here, and roll it down. And then smooth it in to that eye orbit. Okay. And so what we have right here is the bottom inside of our carbuncle. We're going to do the same thing when we put our other two pieces of clay here in the front, but we'll be forming the top of it. But this is where we are right now. Okay. Now you can go on to the next step, but what I usually do is I go ahead and start knocking out some of my checks on those first couple pieces of clay. You know, remember our checks were lacrimal crease, carbuncle, pitch, angle, egg, low point, alligators. I'll post those words onto the group page sometimes, and it's like Jeopardy. I got a bunch of guys that pop up and say, "What are eye checks?" You know, and that's the way it should be. You should know what I'm talking about when I post that on the group page. And but I'm going to go ahead and knock out a couple of those checks just to sort of start bringing everything in at this point. I need to create an egg in the back. You remember from your diagram the things we're looking at. We can't check the pitch yet, but angle, egg, and low point, we can do those checks now, at least initially. So my angle is probably still a little shallow. It needs to be a little bit steeper in order to create that egg shape in the back. Look at your diagram. I'm going to inlay that diagram, but it needs to be an egg shape in the back, on the back side of this cornea. So that means this has got to come down, and I think this probably right here has to come up a little. So I'm going to push it down just a little bit, and I'm going to start to introduce that egg shape. So that means bring it a little pointed in the back there. Clay seems to be a little bit mushy. And then I'm going to come back in here, and I'm going to just come back here and describe a little bit of an egg shape back there. Because another check that we've got back here in the back is we want to be able to see our limbal ring. You can't see your limbal ring in the back when you're doing this, trying to create that egg back there. Your eyelid is probably too closed forward. So I'm using a little different clay here today than I would normally use, and Critter clay is really the only clay to use for this, and for practice you can use the the oil-based clay over and over again, but it's hard to tool it. So if I wanted to use a water-based clay here, and I wanted to use something a little bit softer than Critter clay for the demonstration anyway, a little easier to clean up. But see, I've started to introduce that egg shape back there. And we don't want this, if we were to look at this from the front and see that it's concave, meaning curved inward, then we'd need to put a little more clay there and fill that out. If it's too convex, coming too far out, curving too far out, then we might need to shave some of it. We also don't want to be able to see the back of the eye from the front. So there's a couple of checks that we can do. Even at this point, we can kind of go around and check and look at it from this angle and determine whether or not we're far enough forward. I'm going to put my flashlight on it. I can just see the limbal ring. It's okay, I think, to see a little bit of white back there. That's fine. But unless we're doing something with deep rotation, we're not going to have a lot of white showing. So I can see the limbal ring in the back. I've got a fairly decent egg shape that I can fine tune a little bit more later. My low point right now probably needs a little bit of an adjustment. It may be just a little bit far forward, and I'll come in here and bring it into the center or rear third, and then I'll try not to wet this out too much, but get it cleaned up for you a little bit here. Okay, so now I think we've got a good low point. It's about center, maybe a little bit rear of center. The big deal with that was to make sure that the other side is in the same place for symmetry's sake. All right, we're going to take our next tic tac now, and that tic tac needs to go basically up inside that hood up top there. This is what I call the hood, just a term I use for it. There's a little slot up in here, and we can take that piece of clay, that little tic tac that we're going to roll out, and stick it up inside there and have the point touch right about here. That's the top of our carbuncle. It's the top portion of the bottom portion of the carbuncle. So it's where the top and the bottom will meet together to form the lacrimal crease. And I'm going to roll that little piece out. You'll remember it's like a little tic-tac, and it's going to have a little point on both ends. And I'm just going to stick it up inside there and bring that point to touch. That clay should be at a little bit of an angle. Okay, just like the carbuncle, it's got to form a triangle there, so it should be at a little bit of an angle. And then I'm just going to very lightly press it in, just enough to make it stick. And I'm going to take the front and I'm going to blend it into the form a little bit, just to make sure it stays in place there. We're going to come back and sculpt it with a brush and create our lacrimal crease and tie it into the form. But that's where we are now. So the next thing is to take the last piece of clay, and we're going to cut off this corner. You can see there's an angle right here. We're going to cut that point off right there, and make sure that the fat portion of our last tic-tac lays right in here at a 45-degree angle, and it's going to tie in here, and it's going to tie in up here. And that's going to create the curve over the top, and we just got to be careful that we don't get too much clay in there. So I'm going to take that one out. I'm going to roll it out basically the same, and I'm going to lay it with the fat end, or the fat center, kind of creating the curve over the top of my eye right there, just straight across the corner right there. Flatten it in just enough to get it to stick, and then carefully blend it in to the other clay that's there. A little bit of water, and then we're going to just sort of tie everything in together. It's enough, more than enough clay there to tie everything in together. Got a little crumbly on me at the top. I'm going to just kind of wet that out a little bit. Then I'm going to take my paintbrush and I'll come back and clean that mess up right there. You can see that here it needs to be tied in, up here it needs to be tied in, and right here in the front of the form, I can use my little damp paintbrush and do a little bit of sculpting now, just to tie a few things together. Everything's there. I think we've got the right amount of clay. We're approaching the right shape, and tying that off into the front of the form, creating our top of our carbuncle there, and just tying everything together. And I said I used a different type of clay, and I did. One thing you don't want to do, I don't think, is use critter clay potter's clay for doing your eye work. It crumbles a lot too much. It's not a premium clay. It cracks. Okay for earbuds, but maybe not the best clay to use for doing eye work. The clay that I'm demonstrating with today is a little bit different than critter clay. It's still a fairly premium clay. It's a bit softer, and I wouldn't use it if I was really mounting a deer. But it is water-based and gives me something good to demonstrate with. Has many of the same properties of critter clay. And so now I'm getting ready to do my checks. I've got a good basic shape here, I think. I'm going to go through my checks just like we've talked about them, and just like you'll see from time to time, because it gets posted onto the group page. I'll clean this up just a little bit here. Prefer to have just a little bit more of a flat angle there. And I've said to you, sometimes I've said to some of you, one of the first things you should probably ask yourself when you get to this point, you've put all your clay in, you've got everything basically tied together before you do any of your checks, probably one thing that you should ask yourself, you step back and look at it and say, does that eye look more round than it does long? And if the question is it's more round than it is long, you probably need to go up and adjust your pitch and your angle down a little bit, bring it down on the cornea a little bit, and just to get that more long appearance. Its eye's always going to be more long looking than round. Unless, of course, the deer is excited, aggressive, something like that, where you might see a really big eye, you might see a lot of deep rotation, and the eye might appear to be more round. But for what we're doing, this basic semi-alert to relax, what you're going to see on most of our deer mounts that we do for our customers, and what you see them doing in the wild when they're just moving through an area with no apparent threat in front of them. It won't always appear to be round, usually won't appear to be round. And I'm going to take my flashlight and put on there, and I'm just going to kind of check, make sure I haven't pulled that, make sure my pupil's still somewhere in there and not with my clay too far down onto the pupil. A couple things that I see here. I'm good to go as far as limbal ring goes. I can't see the limbal ring. I can see it a little bit in the back, and I want to. I can't see it in the top third, can't see it in the bottom third, or I can't see it in the center third, top or bottom. I can see a little bit in the front. I can see it in the back, which I want to. So that's a kind of a check that you're going to want to do. Where do I see my limbal ring? The back, and maybe a little bit in the front. It's the only places that you'd expect to see it. And if you're using a nictitating membrane, you're probably not going to see it in the front. But we definitely want to see it at least a little bit back here in the back. We can in this one right here. So now we're going to go through our checks. First check I think important is to check your alligators from the front. And I can look around here, and I can place myself in front of it. We've got a camera that's looking that way, and if you'll get in the front and you'll look, you're just going to kind of follow this curve up from the front corner right there, and make sure that it's a good curve. Make sure you want it going over the top, fairly low on the cornea. You don't want it to have a bunch of turns and angles in it. We want to get a nice curve going over the top. That's our alligator. That's the upper jaw of our alligator. This down here is the bottom jaw of the alligator. If you're not sure what I'm talking about, that's just another tool that you can reference using negative space. Anything on the outside of an object is a negative space. So in the front, as you look at it from the front, it looks kind of like the mouth of an alligator. Maybe it doesn't, maybe it does, but we've used that in a couple of our diagrams. You can go to our newsletter on our website at taxidermytech.com and go to resources, and we've got some diagrams there. Even in the newsletter, you can see the alligators in the summer 2017 newsletter, and I believe it's on page 6. It's interpreting what you see, and on the last page of there you can see the alligators in the front corner. But that's, for me, that's going to be the first check. That this angle ascending from the caruncle and the lacrimal crease going upward comes up to around the pitch and then curves over the top, and then it's always going to be a symmetry check after I do my other eye. And so we get this nice curve going over the top. Same thing, nice downward curve. Nice smooth downward curve, and that would be my alligator check. If it's got any bends or angles in it, sharp angles in it, you want to take it out and work on getting that curve. The next check obviously is going to be our lacrimal crease, which is the right there in front of the caruncle and descending down into the lacrimal gland or the preorbital gland. It's not always a tight crease. We can look at some of our reference here. We can see that in this particular reference it's a tight crease, but it's not always that way. We just generally depict it that way, and it's up to you. But check your reference. But it should come together somewhat. This upper portion and bottom portion here on the inside of the front of the caruncle there, and then we got a nice caruncle going on here. It's subdued there in the back. And then, so that's my next check, is the caruncle. I got a good caruncle shape. As I come up, I'm going to hit the pitch. The pitch is the highest point of the upper eyelid before it descends. And so we're coming up, and right about here in the front third, we can even still see our 1/3 line. That's about where the high point is. And then we get a descending angle that becomes an egg in the back. And in the back of the egg, we can see our limbal ring, and we come on around. We got a nice clean curve till we get to a point somewhere center or rear third, which is our low point of our lower eyelid, and then ascending back up to the caruncle and into the lacrimal crease and down into the preorbital gland. So that's pretty much our checks right there. And if you can do that with one eye and then turn around and do the same thing with the other eye, work both eyes independently of one another, and then get in the front, check your alligators, do all your checks on each eye independently, and then work out any symmetry problems you see. A couple of things that you can do to check the angle of the alligator here in the front is take you a pen, and we'll just kind of take this just to kind of show you and stick a pin down into the clay and let it ride the front of that, the first portion of the ascension of that angle before it curves. And that kind of gives you an upward angle for the front corner, about the first half inch of the front corner. If you put it in on the other side, and when you look at it from the front, if they're not ascending at the same angle, then of course you've got something wrong. One eye is going to end up looking more closed than the other. This is just little tricks that you can check your work, checking those angles in the front. But the main thing is that our angles, our alligators, look the same. So you got to be checking reference. Make sure you're checking your reference. It's nice to have some of this three-dimensional reference. You've got plenty of two-dimensional reference on Google Images. Pull up white-tailed deer eyes. There's a lot of it there. I can tell you 30 years ago it didn't exist, and not in the way that we have it available today. So use it. Make sure you're using reference. As always, if you have any questions or if there's something that I missed here that you want to discuss, please you can send me an email, ken@taxidermytech.com. You can go through our website, send me a message. You can call me, you can text. All of you have my cell phone number, 850-544-7865. And of course you have our shop line. So please call me if you have any questions. Send me a text message. If I can't stop and talk to you then, of course, we'll set up a time to talk later. I hope this was helpful for you. We got a couple more videos that are going to be coming. We're going to be doing more videos throughout the year. And we'll hope you hang in there with us. Thanks.
Yeah.